Right, so it's time to carry on with the top tier skill builds. Right, this one is a bit weird, and I want to start off by saying that I don't really rate these as skill builds. I view them more as bad DPS builds, simply just because we are looking at things that are predominantly aimed at being on a DPS build, such as things as strikers, Heartbreaker, Negotiators, etc, etc. Now, I'm not going to put these in any particular order, and we are going to be referencing the tried and tested skill build, and whereas this DPS, simply because we're going to be using this as the baseline, and from here, the percentage values at the end of the DPS are going to be X% higher, which is going to give you an indication of how much stronger these builds are. So up first we have strikers, utilising the backpack. We're using Picaro's holster as well as a Brazos chest with glass cannon. We're basically trying to prioritise skill damage here, simply because strikers is going to do more than enough when it comes to weapon damage. We're going to go with Ouroboros, and all mods are going to be crit chance, essentially. This gives us some pretty hefty DPS. We actually lose a hell of a lot on our skills, to a point of where our skills are actually doing half of what the original skill build is doing. However, we're doing a hell of a lot more in terms of our weapon damage, and this ends up being 102.7% more DPS than a standard skill build. However, all of this is literally just coming from strikers. That's basically it. This essentially then does just come across as a poor variant of a strikers build, simply because you are able to get so much more with other things. Now, some of you might be questioning why the use of Ouroboros, and it's quite simple. Even with Capacitor adding in its talent, Ouroboros just does so much more. Like, beyond so much more. Ouroboros is kind of silly. The only real time that now, with these sort of hybrid setups, where something like Capacitor could be of use, is if you're going to go with Heartbreaker, simply just because it has something like 15% AR damage. Up next is Negotiators, 4-piece Negotiators. We're going to be using Brazos backpack and chest. A lot of the rolls here are going to be crit damage, simply because, again, we're running Ouroboros, which comes with pretty high crit chance anyway, and Negotiators also gives crit chance. Now, single target, we're only doing 39% more than your normal skill build, and the skills are actually doing quite a bit. But the moment we're able to tag and move on, we get 78%, and then with 3 tags, we're at 217%. So Negotiators is actually technically the most powerful skill build in the game. It is just going to be depending on how many tags you actually have. Hopefully that demonstrates what I mean by they're not really skill builds, they're just bad DPS builds. Now we go into a weird one, ongoing directive. Now I'm pretty sure this is a bug, but it's a bug that's been in the game for a while. It's been reported. No one on the dev team seems to care. This is ongoing directive, and for some weird reason, those hollow point rounds affect your skills. They won't cause bleed, but they will get the damage amplifier for it. So we're going to run Sacrifice and Memento just to try and get a little bit more efficiency out of it. Now, in terms of individual skill damage, as in your skills mainly, these do hit the hardest. Now, we're going to go with Ouroboros again. I did do some testing with an AR or anything with Sadist. Ouroboros just does so much more. This is a good option. My only concern is, if you're going to go this route, it's a very worthwhile route. However, how are you going to proc hollow point rounds? Your options really are just going to be Scorpio, but then you can't use Ouroboros, or have another skill, but then you're going to be losing about half of your skill DPS because you can't have a damage skill. You're going to have to go with something like a Jammer Pulse or something. Or again, you can try and get lucky with something along the lines of the Technician or Survivalist Nades. However, Technician would be ideal for the build that I put on screen, simply just because it gives you the most options for red claws as well to help bolster Ouroboros. Essentially, trying to get this build up and running is a bit twitchy. There are ways around it, but I would say it's very much not going to be new player friendly, and it's also going to be dependent on what weapons you are running and how you want to run them. Scorpio is going to be the best way to get this up and running. However, like I said, no Oreo. And then you've got to look at things like, well, what grenades do I have? Technician does have the jammer grenade, which can disrupt enemies, and you can get ongoing directing to proc off of that. Other than that, you'll be looking at other skills, but then you're going to be missing one of your own skills, which is going to affect your overall performance. It's just weird. Now for the final build on this list, it's a bit of a weird one. Heartbreaker, we're going to use a very unique closer chest for Perfect Spotter, as well as Memento. Now we're going to be using the Police M4 for this, just simply because, 1, we get to use in sync, 2, Heartbreaker comes with 15% AR damage. So, this is the DPS. Now some of you might be wondering how I have 100, and it's quite simple. Within the all weapon damage, we get 40% from the build itself when we have 2 red cores, which is 30 plus level 1000, so we get another 10% from the watch. We then get another 30% from Memento at maximum stacks, and then we get another 30 from In Sync. In Sync also gives another 30 skill damage to our skills. In combination with the weapon and the skills, In Sync absolutely outperforms Flatline. We're also here going to be using Perfect Spotter, simply because it is a little bit of a safer option. Obviously, if you wanted to go Glass Cannon, this will give you more. It will also alleviate the use of having to try and pulse everything, because we're just going to be getting that flat damage all of the time. However, you still will need to use Technician as well as utilizing the Link Laser Pointer to get benefit from Heartbreaker. Overall, this build actually is pretty comfortable. It feels quite weak, but once you sort of get it going, it's pretty strong. However, the part that I feel like a lot of people are going to like is it's the safest. It's probably the hardest to farm for, trying to get these very interesting pieces of Heartbreaker. Most of them do have to have either skill damage, you need 1 piece with crit chance, and you're going to need to be able to get these to drop natively so that we can change the cores to either yellow or red. The Uzina named piece for the chest is going to be the hardest to get. However, I kind of feel like it's probably going to be the best option there is. If not, Glass Cannon, like I said, will give you more, as well as the fact that your skills are going to be able to do quite a bit of damage to everything, regardless of whether they're pulsed or not. It would just mean that the pulsing is just for Heartbreaker, rather than with Perfect Spotter, the pulsing is for both Heartbreaker as well as you and your skills. Anyway, that is just about going to cover it for this video. Hopefully this has helped out. If not, sorry, but have fun, good luck, and don't die. It's bad for the health.